Are we as humans truly set apart from other animals, or was it just a Darwinian fluke that gave us some kind of small advantage that led to our cognition? Or is there something more fundamental to the issue? Are we made in the image of God? These are all questions that I've been thinking about and have interested me recently, and in this video I just want to share my perspective on these questions in the hope that it might be beneficial in some way to someone who might be watching. So in this first part of a two-part series on the issue, I want to outline or define the biological differences between humans and other animals, specifically non-human primates, just to contextualize the space before I try to explain why those differences might have occurred, which I think is a more interesting question. So I will go into those explanatory questions in the second part of this series, but for this part it's just a biological approach to the differences between humans and our closest relatives. So 29% of the human brain is made up or constituted by the prefrontal cortex, and this part of the brain, as postulated by Alexandra Romanovich Luria, is responsible for conscious, voluntary, willed, non-automatic, and goal-directed action. And a article published by Oxford Academic, it's a scientific journal called Brain. And this article was written by Richard Levy. It states that, and I quote, "This part of the brain is so important to human beings that if deprived of it, our behavior is reduced to action reactions and automatisms." So all those sources that I'm using, I'm going to link below in the description if you wish to engage in wider reading on this topic. But I just want to outline these biological differences in brain structure, so that there's some kind of context to the explanations that I'll be providing in future videos of my thoughts on the topic, just an opinionated discussion. And also I just think that the how question is also extremely interesting. Like, how are we different, not just why? And I definitely don't have any kind of a mastery on this topic. I don't claim to take credit for any of the things that I'm discussing in this video. It's just to outline the context, and full credit goes to all the articles in the description. This is kind of just to aid in a further elaboration of my own thoughts. So how do we know that the prefrontal cortex is so vital to these functions and thought processes? There was a neurologist called Francois Lhermitte who, through clinical observations, seen this phenomena of environmental dependency in patients with severe prefrontal damage. They couldn't resist reacting to the pressures or attractions of their environment, so they participated in utilization behaviors. So if something was set in front of them, they had to use it, or they had to pick it up and manipulate it. And imitation behavior, so if someone started clapping, they had this impulsive automated reaction where they started clapping as well. So there's been many other observations like this. Without prefrontal cortex integrity, you lose the ability to mentally deliberate. You kind of just participate in these automated and impulsive actions without the ability to contemplate whether or not they would be what you want to do, taking your future into account or anything like that. You just can't. You don't have that mental deliberation available to you. It appears that all these thought processes and cognitive abilities that we associate with being human, it's something like imagination. So we have the ability to search the temporal and semantic space and get stuff from like that's distant temporally. So we can link ideas that didn't occur at the same time, occurred throughout our past, and we have a lot stronger of a memory than non-human primates. So we can draw on our memory to aid in our thoughts, and we can participate in abstract thinking. We can project ourselves into the future. This idea of like time traveling is a big factor in how we're cognitively different from other primates. I suppose imagination is like the ability to form ideas without sensory input. So you're forming an idea that's not linked to your environment, let's say. And we can also participate in like analogical reasoning. So we can use one system as a model for another. Like you can compare planets going around the sun in the solar system to an electron going around the nucleus, just to visualize and understand the system better. You can apply what you know from something else. So all this type of abstract thinking depends on the integrity of the prefrontal cortex. Non-human primates do also have a prefrontal cortex, but this is the main difference in brain structure between us and other primates. Our prefrontal cortex is, like I said, 29% of our brain matter, while in chimpanzees it's only 17%, and in macaques it's 11.5%, and those are like our closest ancestors. They were obviously chimps descended from a common ancestor like a long time ago, like 5 million years ago. There's this massive leap in prefrontal cortex complexity and size. There was also a study done by Dante Mantini et al., which found evidence for two distinct frontoparietal networks in humans that are not present in non-human primates. And these two networks have been linked to those same functions that we talked about. So imagination, abstract reasoning, logical thinking, and intelligence in humans. There is this biological difference that accounts for great differences in intelligence that we see. You know, the differences are reflected in the structures of our brains. The complexity of our brains differs quite significantly. However, it doesn't appear that there was a leap in brain structure as such. So the prefrontal cortex development doesn't seem to be a leap. It seems to still be a continuum, or that's what a lot of the research that I read states that. But there is, of course, no denying the massive gap in intelligence between us and any other animal. And the study or article by Richard Levy, published in Brain, proposed the three major differences in cognitive abilities present between humans and non-human primates. and they are as follows. The expansion of the mental space of representation in working memory, allowing greater integration of past experiences and prospective futures, a greater capacity to link discontinuous or distant data, whether temporal or semantic. So that's what I was saying before. It's like you can imagine concepts outside of sensory input and link things from different time periods and from different contexts. And the third one is a greater capacity for abstraction, allowing us beyond the concrete data immediately accessible to our perception, so that would be your sensory inputs, to classify knowledge in different ways, to engage in analogical reasoning, so using one system to better understand another system, or to acquire abstract values which lead to our beliefs and morals. You have a different value system than just I need to get food or I need to survive. You see that there are more complex patterns of being which might actually lead to you being able to survive, thrive with the people around you for a long period of time. And those kind of ideas that give rise to these different value systems are fully dependent on having the extremely well developed prefrontal cortex that humans have, and so are all the aspects of the three major differences in our cognitive abilities that Richard Levy outlines. While all this is extremely interesting, and finding out about the neurological differences between humans and non-humans is fascinating, it doesn't, in the same way that the Big Bang Theory cannot provide a why, only a how, the processes of evolution and the differences in biology that we see do not explain why they exist. You can't explain why something exists with its existence. My existence does not explain why I exist. The more interesting question here is why? And I thought it was useful to explain the physical, biological differences to open up the space for an explanation, because it means that we cannot disregard the differences once we define them. Once they're described and defined, it means that there must be some kind of explanation for it. And that's what I'm gonna go over in the next video, the next part in this series. So thank you very much for watching. If you find this interesting, you might find the next part interesting as well. I hope this information might have been beneficial to you in some way. God bless.